So your first podcast was on what?
My father was a retired police officer. He was the idea behind the whole podcast. He had to bury 5 of his friends due to suicide, and there was not a discussion that was being had around that kind of mental health issue. It was kind of like a bury it and we'll deal with it later. And so it was initially his idea. He was like, hey, I want to do an interview with you because you're really good at drawing that out of me. Like, what do you think? And so we just set it up. We got like no views, but a ton of responses. And
Interesting.
Like, the resources that we provided inside of that podcast reached out to us, and they were like, hey, we don't know who you are, but like we've gotten contacted by a couple of officers that are having issues, and they said that they saw your podcast. So then the second one, we just finished up with Jeff Dragovich, and that one, like I said, is addressing the opioid crisis and his journey back from addiction. And another conversation.
Who's Jeff? Why does that name sound familiar?
He's one of the top lenders in the city.
Okay.
He's on the lending side. He's over at Fairway.
I think I might have just met him.
You just did the Real Producers.
Okay, yeah. That's why.
You
We
were on
were
the
just
same
texting
panel.
this morning about watches.
Yeah?
He said, "What watch you wearing today?"
No, dude,
He
he's
sent me a picture of
watch
his,
guy.
yeah, and
he's
then I sent a
huge
picture of
watch guy.
mine.
He's wearing the sub.
I didn't know that.
The gold and blue sub on the,
Yep.
the
Oh,
second
yeah, I
episode.
saw it. Yeah.
So he's wearing that during
Uh-huh.
our podcast, and he and I just really resonated after. So yeah, we really resonated because I'm in a stage in my life that's kind of difficult, where I'm outgrowing a lot of my friends,
Yeah, I know that feeling.
and it sucks.
Yeah,
But
it
at the
does.
same time, and you know,
That's a good
it's
one.
funny because like this for me is a dream come true, because one of the things that you said that has really kind of carried me through the past couple of weeks is that the people that got me here aren't necessarily the people that are going to get me to where I want to go.
Good memory.
And that has been a huge piece of this.
Are you recording?
I am.
Okay, good.
Josh, just pay attention to your breathing into this.
Okay.
So that was a really big piece of this chapter. And so when, like I said, when we met, that was about 2 years into me following you. And I just kind of told myself, dude, like as soon as I saw your content, I was like, if I ever see this dude out in public, I'm going to go up to him and shake his hand. And we met at that real estate and cigars event. And middle of the conversation, dude, I saw you walk up, and I was just like, I need to walk away. I need to go to the bathroom. Like, just give me 5 minutes. I'll be right back. I came up, you were talking, and I was like, dude, I'm so sorry if I'm interrupting anything, but I promised myself that if I got this opportunity, I'd shake your hand. And you were so humble. You were so kind. Like, you were so welcoming. It wasn't like anything what I thought it was going to be like. And so that just, like, manifested itself into this after a certain amount of time. And it's been a really difficult couple of months. And this, for me, is, like, a huge step in the right direction. So from the bottom of my heart, man, before I get emotional, like,
That's all right.
like
yeah.
honestly, thank you so much for doing this. And, you know, you're part of, whether you want to be or not, you're part of my journey. And
Cool.
I really appreciate that. So having you on my podcast is a dream come true, bro.
My man.
It really is.
That's a hell of an intro.
I really appreciate it, man.
Well, that is one of the reasons that I'm not a big fan of like building a course, because everybody's always like, why don't you build a course? Why don't you have a course? Why aren't you monetizing all this?
No.
And what is it for? What is it for? And I'm like, I just like giving information out. And if some people find it to be of value, then I've won.
Yeah.
You know, and hearing you say that is just a representation of my intentions behind my social media. Just got off the phone with a buddy of mine that's a big time high-end realtor here, and he quoted something I had said. It's so funny because I don't actually post the videos. You know, I obviously make them, and obviously content came out of my mind, but the team chops them up and then puts them out. So oftentimes I don't know what's even out there or what has hit with people until I connect with them.
Yeah.
And hear, oh, that video resonated with that guy.
Yeah.
So you did that. I got another guy today that video resonated with, and just hearing that is like, yeah, that's my purpose. I'm accomplishing my goal. That's why I do social media.
Yeah. And it's,
That's it. I have no other reason. I don't have to have another reason.
No. And, you know, it's one of those immeasurables that is really hard to monitor or to put a number to until moments like this happen. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. And if you want to, we'll jump in, man.
Let's roll, brother.
All right, awesome. Welcome back to another episode of The Story, the podcast where we remind you that you are the writer, the director, and the producer of your own life. And regardless of the mistakes that you've made in your life or where you might find yourself today, you can always take control of the narrative. And today we have an incredible guest. I'm so happy to be here inside of his podcast studio. He is a husband, a father, a business owner, an entrepreneur, and a philanthropist, father to 4 children, husband to an incredibly strong breast cancer survivor, Galindo, and a dream come true to have on my podcast, Josh Galindo. Thank you so much for being here, man. I appreciate that.
My treat, man. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to have a great discussion.
Well, let's just jump right in. We'll start where it all started. Tell me, when were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born December 26, 1984, the day after Christmas, and born right here in Las Vegas. I've lived here my whole life. Except for a few years I lived in Mexico, but I'm sure we could touch on that as we go through this. But,
I've got it in my notes.
Okay, all right. Yeah, born and raised right here in Las Vegas, and I'm a Christmas baby. My mom went into labor. You know, you can imagine running around with my older sister to different grandparents' houses, and then she sits down, is the story. She sits down after that big, long Christmas day, and then boom, her water breaks, and it's me.
Are you kidding me? I didn't know that. That's pretty wild, man.
Yeah.
So you are a Christmas baby. You're a Christmas gift to your mom.
Yes. What is that noise? I'm sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
You hear that? The cameras will pick it up. The mics will pick that up.
All right.
Oh, the air?
Might be the vents, yeah. Oh, take your time, man. And there it goes. Now it's gone. That's wild. Okay, perfect.
That's good. The mics aren't picking it up.
If the mic's not picking it up, then we're fine, yeah.
Yeah, so a full-blown Christmas baby, and you know, it's a curse and a sin as you get older. When you're younger, you know, a lot of the birthday celebrations are wrapped into Christmas.
Yeah, exactly.
As I get older, I don't even care, and I'm used to it.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
Were you only child?
No, I have an older sister. She's 3 years older than I am, but my mom raised both of us alone.
Okay.
So no dad.
So that's actually a segue into one of the things that I wanted to talk about. On one of the discussions that you have on your podcast, you put it very, very graciously that your dad terminated his parental duties when you were really young. How old were you?
I was 1. So I never consciously met my dad until I think I was like 23 or 24. So I went my entire life, like no birthday cards, no weekends, no 2 weeks with dad in another state. Like dad was gone, MIA, never a part of my life. So he left when I was 1 and my sister was 3. And terminating parental rights, I don't even think you could do anymore.
So that was a legal process that he actually went through?
Yeah, that's the wild thing. What I understood it as with my mom reciting the story is that the judge looked at her and was like, you understand that I can deny this or I can approve it. But if I approve it, it means you cannot lean on it. You cannot go after him for child support. You were on your own, lady. And my mom was like, I got this shit.
No kidding.
Yeah, and she was on her own, and she did a great job raising me, and my sister. I was a tough kid to raise. She had big ambitions, so she was successful, and which is very difficult now that I'm a parent to wrap my mind around how to be a single parent and still live up to the ambitions that you lay out for yourself. You know, it's almost a this or a that if you're a single parent.
Yeah.
A dual parent household, I could see how that makes sense because in my household, at least, I have the luxury and privilege because of my wife to go and pursue my dreams. And then my wife manages the whole house side of it, which is so easily misconstrued in the world that there's one that's better than the other. Or one has more work or less. I wouldn't change anything in my life for my wife's life. Like managing those kids, I have 4 little ones, 11, 9, 7, and 5. managing their lives, their lunches, their school schedule, their soccer schedule, their bedtimes, their baths, their outfits, their clothes. I mean, man, the list just goes on. Like, she's a fucking killer. But because she's such a killer in that space, it allows me to be ambitious and pursue all of my dreams, which is really awesome and very selfless of my wife. But so back to my mom, what was so impressive is that she was able to do all of those things.
Yeah.
The baths, the clothes, the lunches, the drop-offs, the this, the that, and still figure out time to go and be a rock star in her space.
What did she do?
She was in the title and escrow space.
No kidding.
That's why I love title and escrow people. I do. I was and that's why I'm so loyal to my escrow officer.
Yeah.
Amongst her being great, if she wasn't great, that would be a different conversation. The loyalty would end based on the service. But my mom raised my sister and I and provided a decent life for us and a great life for herself because her clients were loyal to her. So it's the least I can do is to repay somebody in the space.
Of course.
Yeah.
No, I love that, man.
So, but she was an escrow officer for like big old deals. She was doing like, the one I always brag about was she did the Rio for $888 million. So, and $888 million in like 1999 is probably like $2 billion today, you know.
Money,
but she
yeah.
had a lot of big commercial clients that were doing big commercial deals, $50 million buildings, $50 million worth of dirt. So she didn't frown upon houses, but she understood title and escrows. If she was going to be good at it, she was going to be the best at the best version of it and make the most amount of money, and that's what she did.
And it sounds like it runs in the family. You've always talked about being the best in your space and being as good as you can be.
That is my gig is whatever I pursue, I'm going to be either the best or in the top three, and I'm totally content with being in the top three. My preference would be the best, but if I'm not, I'm okay with that. But I at least have to compete within the top three of anything that I do.
So growing up, you said that you were a difficult kid to raise, and one of the things that I've heard about you is that your mom set up a little escapade for you. Can you walk us through what happened there?
So I was a troubled teen. I probably started, a lot of the troubled teen stuff came from, it's all rooted in issues, rooted in self-limiting beliefs and issues. And when I started to realize that I didn't have a dad is when I started to paint myself different than everybody else. And when you paint yourself different, a lot of other shit comes with that. So I would say probably somewhere around 8, 9, or 10, you know, I'm at soccer practice and my mom drops me off. And then Jimmy, my buddy or whoever, mom and dad drop him off. Or dad's screaming in his corner, my mom's screaming in my corner. You know, kids in the neighborhood, activities where their dads show up to play with me and my friend because my mom's at work. You know, so I started to see differences. And then seeing the differences, I started to think that I was different and then I started to process, where is my dad? Why is my dad not here? And then it kind of morphed into what I would identify as a self-limiting belief that my dad left me because of me. He didn't want me. And because he didn't want me, that means I'm less than. I'm not as good as. And so I always like to get into the whys I acted out. I wasn't just a lunatic kid. I had different programming because of my circumstances. And everybody's got circumstances. I'm not unique. But this was mine. Mm-hmm. And so I was a rebellious kid. A lot of it really started, once I started to learn that about myself or started to compare myself to other kids, I had actually picked up a plastic strip that they put into nail guns, and it has little bullets without the slug in them. They come in like red and green, yellow packets, and you put them in nail guns, and they use that to shoot into the concrete. You ever hear like the psh?
Yeah.
You know, that's that shell firing to put a nail into concrete. So I was roaming a construction site one day after school and found that little cartridge. Took it, my buddy says, take it home and hit it with a rock or something. It'll make a loud noise. I know. It's fucking ludicrous. So I take it home and I pop it out of the cartridge, out of the plastic thing. I set it on the concrete. I'm actually on the phone with like my girlfriend at the time. Even crazier, she was in 8th grade, I was in 6th grade, and I asked her, I go, why is it that you like me when I'm in 6th grade and you're in 8th grade? And she says, because you have really pretty eyes. That happened on this phone call. Okay, so fast forward back to, I pull this cartridge out, holding the phone with my shoulder. I grab a hammer, and I hit this little bullet, so to say. And it explodes, obviously, and shoots through my eyelid into my eyeball. So it shoots straight up and diagonally. And I blink, and with my good eye, I see blood shoot out of my bad eye, or my left eye. Yeah, of course. I dropped the phone, freak out. I lived in a guard-gated community where nobody spoke to each other. It was a very safe neighborhood because my mom worked all the time, so she didn't want, me anywhere else. But none of the neighbors talked. So I run across the street, bang on their door in my underwear, and they open the door, and there's this kid bleeding from his eye. And they're like, what the fuck happened? Like, they knew we lived next door, but, like, we weren't, like, friendly like that.
Yeah.
I just burst into their house. I remember, I'll fast forward out of the story relatively quickly, but I remember running into their house and splashing water on my eye, like, thinking that would help. And I just remember seeing so much blood all over their dishes. And I'm like, fuck, I'm fucked.
Yeah.
And anyway, fast forward, ambulance comes, mom comes, 4 eye surgeries later. It was a 6-month recovery process, and they put me in a distant learning school type program. So I got behind in school. So now you blend all of my natural issues that I had as a kid and the fact that I was behind in school, and I just became incredibly rebellious. Fighting, knives, drugs, sex, all the stuff that you wouldn't want a young kid doing. And as things progressed, as I got older, the consequences got bigger. Like, my friends were doing really bad things. I was still a good kid at my core, but I was being influenced. And then I started running away, dropped out of school, basically. I'm like a sophomore, and I basically dropped out. So I ran away about 3 times, if I recall correctly, for about 5 days, which I can't even imagine what that's like as a parent now, not knowing where your kid is for 5 days, especially before there was, like, tracking and location devices and cell phones. So after the 3rd time I come home, my mom answers the door, and you think she just want to beat the shit out of me, and understandably and rightfully so. Instead, she just hugs me, and we both kind of cry and weep, and I'm, of course, feeling shameful that I put her through all this pain. I don't know why I was doing it, but I was a young kid with not thinking clearly. And I go upstairs, and I go to my room, and I kind of just dismiss her, like, what are you doing? Yeah. Like, why are you being so lovey? And then right before bed, she comes and gives me another hug, and I'm sitting in my chair. I thought about this for months once I got to the Mexico location, because you have nothing but time. And I remember she walked in. I wouldn't even get up. I didn't even get up. She just leaned down and gave me a hug. And I was like, that was weird. Good night, good night. And about 5 hours later or so, 6 hours later, 3 in the morning, wherever that lands, 2 guys, I wake up to 2 guys holding my arms. And they were escorts. And they had grabbed my arms while I was sleeping. And I wake up to 2 UNLV football player-sized guys.
Fuck.
Yeah, holding my arms going, come on, let's go, get out of bed. And I'm thinking, what the fuck? Where am I going?
You have no idea what's going on.
No, you don't. And people, as I get older, there could be holes poked in the story. But the reality is now that I have kids, I could do this to any one of my kids right now. When you're young, you sleep so deep. You don't have an understanding of the world. Yeah. But all this is 100% the truth. And so much so that once I graduated this school, I was an escort. And this is how I escorted kids as well. So I'm like, where am I going? What am I doing? And they're like, you're going to this school. You're only going to be gone for 3 weeks. It's a co-ed school. They paint the school really beautifully so that you don't resist. Well, my mom informed them that I was really fast, and meaning I could run, and that I probably would. And so these guys put me in knee braces so that I would waddle and not be able to get out. So they wrap me in knee braces. I get dressed. I grab like whatever I could grab. I get in the back of this car. They throw me a pack of cigarettes. It's all intentional. The knee braces so you can't run. The pack of cigarettes are so that if you do run, you're so winded that they can catch you.
Yeah.
Okay, I get to McCarran Airport at the time, and we waddle through the airport at 3 in the morning, throw me into an airplane, fly me to San Diego, waddle me back out, get me in a rental car, drive right into TJ, right through TJ, Rosarito, then Ensenada, and I roll up to Mexico where there's 18-foot walls, this school, in orange, painted orange. And they slowly, manually open the gates. We drive in. They close them behind us. We go inside the little shack at the entryway. And I'm just trying to get a feel for this new environment. And so I'm like, hey, I got to go to the bathroom because I just wanted to see more of what was going on. And when they picked up the radio and said Cody Orojo, or not Cody Orojo, excuse me, when they said, we have a kid that needs to use the bathroom in Spanish. And the guy comes and he's got a slew of keys and grabs me and walks me to another building. I'm like, this is some serious shit. Like, I thought they'd be like down the corner. It was like, no, I needed to be escorted. So I get in there and it looks like Pleasantville. Nobody is talking to anybody, and all of the kids are dressed in uniforms, but it is like super structured. So this is already wild to me. So, so I'm washing my hands, and this kid next to me walks up, and of course, being who I was, I'm like, I need to start making friends here. So I look at him, I go, what the fuck is this place? He refuses to look at me and will not talk back.
He wouldn't even make eye contact.
No, and that's not allowed. Once I got enrolled into the system and understood the way of the world, new kids that come in, you can't look at them, you can't talk to them, you can't anything.
Jesus.
So, but now I'm even more weirded out. Anyway, so they moved me up to the third floor. It was called the tercer piso, the third floor.
Yeah.
Tercer piso, tercer, I don't remember how to say third. Anyway, they shaved my head, put me in a uniform, and then they finally hit me with the reality. They say, you're going to be here for about 16 months. When I heard, they told me I could be there from 12 months to 2 years, to 24 months. And I completed it in 16 months. But I remember thinking, this is impossible. So I freaked out, start cussing, start yelling, say, get my mom on the phone. This is bullshit. You guys, she didn't know what she was signing me up for. You guys told me this, and then I start escalating the energy, trying to be tough and get a reaction out of these guys. That's when they call Cody Orojo, and they get a big-ass dude named Arturo to run in the door. And I'm not kidding. This is the biggest Mexican dude I've ever seen. Grabs me by the back of my pants, the back of my head, and slams me on the ground. Oh, shit. Puts my arms behind me, my legs behind me, lifts my head up, and puts my head resting on my chin. And I had to sit that way for 4 hours before I got to get out of there. And then once you're done with the 4 hours, then they put a piece of paper or a domino on the wall, and you have to hold it with your forehead, with your hands behind your back for a few hours. Then you get to go back to your family. Jesus. And that was my first day in Mexico.
And your family is more so the class.
Yeah, the classroom. Class. Forgive me. Yeah, my family is like, it was called the Noble family, and it was a group of 25 boys. There's 10 families in the school of about 25 to 30 boys each, and that's who you conduct your entire stay with, in a sense.
Would you say that molded your sense of discipline today?
Absolutely. The level of discipline that was implemented there was 100% in line with a boot camp. Like Hell Week these guys go to Hell Week for 2 weeks. There may be a bigger challenge on a physical level, but the duration that I was in while I was the discipline and the duration combined at that school, I would say I'd smoke a Hell Week in the military all day. Like these guys would walk around and go like this with they'd wipe a piece of the counter, your bed, your basket, anything. If there was any dust on it, then you were sent to what was called worksheets. And worksheets is a disciplinary space where you sit with your legs together, your back straight, you can't look right or left, and you have to listen to tapes like Catcher in the Rye and other dumb books, American books like that. And then you have to test on those books. And if you get a 70% or less, then you don't get credit for the tape. And each credit's a half hour, and you get like points taken off every time you get 70% or more. If your legs come apart, you get 3 more points, which represents a whole nother class, which is 30 minutes. Man. I mean, the list goes on and on, dude. I don't want to bore you to death, but the discipline there was unbelievable. You know, you'd be sleeping at 5 in the morning, 4 in the morning, 1 in the morning, whatever time it was, and they would just decide to raid your rooms. They'd come in there with air horns, and wake you up, scare the shit out of you. You'd jump out of your bed. You'd run to the courtyard. You'd stand in a perfect line for so long that you would rest your head on the back of the guy in front of you. Then you would let the guy behind, you would all take turns. Yeah. And then you go back to your room, and your fucking bed is in a million pieces. Your shit's everywhere. And you couldn't look at girls. You couldn't talk without permission. You couldn't go to the bathroom without permission. You couldn't get up without permission. You couldn't. You had to go to bed every night at the same time, wake up at the same time, food at the same time. While we ate, we listened. This is where a lot of my intellect came from. Every breakfast, lunch, and dinner, they played motivational tapes like Zig Ziglar,
Oh, wow.
Anthony Robbins.
Rones?
Who?
Jim Rones?
No, that one didn't ring a bell. This old school black guy that was amazing. If it comes to me, I'll say his name, but he was a great speaker. Anyway, and you would have, and at the end of the night, you'd have to write a full page reflections front and back on what you learned that day. And there was many other things, but yes, the discipline in my life, the understanding of how my brain works, my ability to articulate my thoughts, my ability to read body language and people, because you got to remember, if we can't talk without permission, that means we couldn't talk at all. And you couldn't talk once you got into your rooms, but you could have full-blown conversations without saying a word. And then there was even one point where if somebody tried to run away in the school, they'd put the entire school on
Lockdown?
but silence code. Everything's in Spanish. Codio, silencio, codio, or codio, silencio. Codio, silencio.
Codio rojo.
Yeah. So on silence code, where you couldn't say a word. Like there were moments throughout the day that we could congregate and talk, and that was intended. But when you were on silence code, you couldn't say a word for 2 weeks. So 2 weeks goes by. They put us back in the courtyard to tell us we're all getting off of silence code, and someone tried to run away when they were all gathering. So they said, hey, we were going to take you off, but now you're back on. So I didn't say a word. Like a word. It's not an exaggeration. I didn't say one word for 4 weeks in my life. And if that will teach you to read energy, to be able to project energy, to be able to read people, communicate without speaking.
Yeah, light travels a lot faster than sound does. What you say doesn't say what your body says.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's a great skill. Well,
and that was Mexico, and I have more Mexico, but you can bounce around because we got time.
Well, we got If we
got time restraints.
If we were up to, I could, or if we could, I'd be here for hours. But let's fast forward a little bit. So, it really does sound like your mom exacerbated the absence of a man's life or a man's presence in your life within those 2 years. But let's get onto a little bit of a lighter topic here. What's the significance of Nora's cuisine to you?
Nora's cuisine. Nora's taught me so much. So my mom never gave me anything. It's very similar to how I raise my kids now. They live a very luxurious life. They're growing up in the ridges. Dad has a McLaren, a Lamborghini, a Range Rover, a Tesla, a Sprinter, a second home. The list goes on of luxury goods that they're surrounded by. But I don't buy my kids shit. Literally. Like if they want something, then they have to go and do a lemonade stand. They have to go to the neighbors and pick up dog shit, empty out my other neighbor's cigar can. I don't buy them anything. So my mom raised me very similar in that sense. As I got older, I got an allowance. It was $20 a week, but that had to go towards everything. That was my lunch at school. That was extracurricular activities. And if I wanted more than that, then I had to go earn it. So my point in bringing all that up is at 16, I had gotten back. At 17 and a half, forgive me, I had gotten back from Mexico after having been there for a year and a half. And my mom, same style. You're going to earn whatever you want. So I had to go get a job. So I was going to schools, football practice, and I got a job at Nora's. And so I would go to school all day, then go to football practice, then go to Nora's and work until 10 at night, go to sleep, wake up, and repeat. And Nora's taught me a tremendous amount of humility because I had gotten out of the school with an unbelievable amount of confidence because I had learned so much about myself. I'd overcome a massive hurdle in anybody's life. Yeah. It's kind of, so there was some arrogance and cockiness associated with that young, high testosterone, hadn't really gotten my teeth kicked in version of who I was. And Nora's, the gentleman there that had ran the place, which was Gio Marcello and Mr. Gino, which was Nora's husband. They really taught me about hard work and humility. It was all about humility there. And I remember it was almost a blessing that their culture at that time, and it's not this way anymore, was so family driven that it allowed everybody to talk to each other how they felt necessary. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a structured corporate environment. So I remember, I got into like a screaming match with Gio, and he was like, you've got fucking balls this fucking big and all this potential, but they're getting in your way. And he's like screaming at me, but kind of giving me like a great life lesson.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'll never forget it to this day. There was just a lot of life lessons. I would actually chalk up the Nora's experience in my life as a mentorship type experience. You know, it was very little money. At the time, I was a busser, so the expectation was low anyway. Yeah. Very little money in exchange for grueling amounts of work. Family environment, which allowed everybody to just yell at each other when they needed to yell at each other. And so I had to kind of cut my teeth with the world, because that's the world.
Yeah.
At a young age, at 17 to 19 or 20. And actually without Nora's, I probably wouldn't have had a lot of the success I had, because I would butt heads with a lot of those guys and then they'd fire me. And then I'd realize I needed the job, and then I'd come crawling back and ask for forgiveness, talk about humility, and they were kind enough to give me the job back, and then I'd get into a fight with them again. I got fired and rehired like 3 times there. I'm not kidding. And a lot of it was in the beginning of my real estate journey. It was like, you know, I was making a bunch of money, and then I didn't think I needed Nora's, and the real estate thing dried up, and then I had to go crawl back to Nora's, and they gave me back my job. And so, yeah, that was pretty significant.
And you met Crystal there, right?
I did. Yeah, not to mention I met my wife there. Yeah, Crystal.
So let's talk about Crystal for a little bit, because obviously with the time restraints that we have to fast forward through this a little bit. And I really want to address this, because there's a lot of men out there that are having to struggle with the inability to validate the experience of having a wife go through that, because they're so focused on making sure that their life is as comfortable as possible. And so I want to talk about, obviously, when Crystal was diagnosed, and more importantly, your experience, and then how you address that with the kids.
So let's see. What was that journey like? So Crystal, you know, life has always been very interesting with me. And even to this point, I don't like celebrating any wins. And I think what I've learned by not celebrating wins is learning that the journey is what it's about. It sounds ridiculous, but it really is the fun part of the drive. And so what I'm getting at is we had just bought a Karma Rivero, which is like this new car brand that was trying to make a name for itself. And in doing so, when you bought the car, they'd given you a trip. They paid an all-expense trip to the car factory so you could learn how the car was made. They put us up in a Monarch hotel. It was $1,000 a night, and at the time, $1,000 a night was absurd. You know, now I understand it because I got so many kids and inflation. But at the time, I remember thinking, this is insane. They actually flew us out there, gave us a room, gave us another Karma to drive around the city, paid for all of our dinners, had a get-together with all the other car owners. It was really cool. My point in saying all this is I remember looking at Crystal as we're driving down Pacific Coast Highway, and the windows are all down, the music's on, and her hair is just blowing in the wind. And I remember thinking to myself, I fucking made it. Like, I finally made it. And it was an incredible feeling, even like going back to that space. But like, I've made it. And then like 6 months later, you know, I get home, obviously, from that moment, and Crystal told me that she felt like she'd had a lump on her chest. And I was very dismissive of health. I didn't understand how important health was because it was never relevant in my life. I'm very sensitive to health today. But so she tells me she has this lump on her breast. I'm like, we'll see what it is. I don't even know what cancer is. I've never even heard of breast cancer, kind of, you know, headspace. I've heard of it, obviously, but you get my point. It's not scary to me. And I remember the day, I didn't even know that she had gone to the doctor that day. I remember she was going to go to the doctor. Anyway, so I'm at home, and we don't have cell service in the neighborhood, and she's trying to call me, and I'm at the house, and she's driving into the neighborhood trying to call me. We can't connect. And she finally comes home. I'm downstairs at the bottom of the stairs, and she's walking in from the garage, which is a hallway-like walking path, and then she turns left, and she can't even talk. And she just looks at me and shakes her head. Yeah, that was probably the fucking most fucked up moment. The most sobering, most fucked up moment I think I've ever had as an adult. And what she was saying yes to is that she had breast cancer. And And I remember looking back at her and going like, nothing else matters in the world. Like nothing else matters. And I held her, and her body was a noodle. You know, it was floppy almost. I couldn't even find a stiff spot in her body to like find strength and the ability to hold her with comfort. But that's how like afraid she was.
Yeah.
So fast forwarding through that was the emotion that I had felt. It was daunting. It was frightening. It was, you got to think what I was up against. It was like all of my life's ambitions and goals and desires and 4 kids. And what does this look like if we don't win? You know, am I allowed to remarry? Do I want to remarry? If I remarry, is it every birthday, Christmas, Thanksgiving, New Year's, 4th of July? Is it a toast to Crystal if she's not here with my new wife? If I have a new wife, how do the kids, you know, as a man in that position up against those consequences, I don't want to think about those things, but by default, you know, are my ambitions now being suffocated? Will I have to focus solely on the kids? Of course. You know, all these things are obvious. So, like, it wasn't like, oh, we have to figure out how to make sure Crystal survives. It was like, what does this look like for the rest of my 50 years on this planet if I'm the victim of my wife not making this?
Yeah.
And so it was insane. It was fucking insane is the simple answer. But like I do with everything, and like my wife does with everything, we rolled our sleeves up, and I always tell people, we rolled our sleeves up. We rolled the motherfucker up and we smoked it. That's what we did. And we legitimately did. We were like, all right, we understand that time is our worst enemy right now. This is a big message for the folks out there that are listening that may know somebody. When health is at stake, you have to identify goals and you have to identify the battle. The battle is time, because the longer this shit sits in our body, the more it can spread, the bigger it can get. So time is everything. So we sat down, we said to ourselves, okay, whatever they tell, we're going to have a diagnosis and a treatment plan in 4 weeks. That is like lightning fast in this world, just FYI. So that was our commitment. And then we're like, okay, how are we going to make this commitment happen? Any time that a doctor tells us that we're going to have to wait for something, we're going to cut it in half. And so that was our commitment. If a doctor told us 10 days, we went and searched for 5 other doctors until we found someone that told us that they can get it done in 5 days. If we couldn't find another doctor, we called and drove and sat in waiting rooms and stared at people and made people feel uncomfortable and aggravated people. There was nothing that was going to come between me and my wife surviving. No ego, no, I don't want to ruffle feathers. I don't want to piss anybody off. I was a blazing tornado on behalf of Crystal everywhere I went. It was like, I need that now. Sir, that'll take 3 hours. I don't fucking have 3 hours. You have an hour and a half, and I'm going to sit here until you get it to me. And if you don't get it to me, I'm going to make a scene in the waiting room. Now, whether or not I had to do any of that stuff, it didn't matter. I planted the seed. But that was the tone everywhere I went. When I went to doctor's appointments with her, I got all the information. Hey, I get it that you see 50 patients a day that are on life support, but I need you to be focused. I need you to be focused right now, right here. Okay, doc, are you listening? Okay, I'm going to have her ask you some questions, and you're going to take the fucking time to answer them. Are we on the same page? And if you're not my doctor, then get out. We'll find somebody that will give us the time. And that was the level of advocating that I had to have for her to accomplish all of this stuff. And it worked. And then, you know, we didn't believe any of the statistics. We were like, we are superhuman. We had to believe that and embrace it. Everybody told us that this batch of chemo was going to be the worst. And we were like, no, it won't be. We're going to figure out how to make it the best or make it better than what you're describing. Everybody told us that she was going to lose her hair. We're like, no, she won't lose her hair. We're going to find a way to overcome that. And sure enough, we did. Everybody was looking at us the first day that we brought our cold capping gear into the chemo room, almost in a sense of like, it's not going to work. Could you imagine walking in there and they're just looking at you like, that ain't going to work. We've seen people do it before. I was even more invigorated to make sure that every cap was changed at the precise time, that at the precise temperature throughout the whole day. You got to think, you know, you asked me from my point of view. I can't speak on behalf of my wife. She has her whole perspective and point of view. But this was my point of view. I had to wake up at like 5:45 or 6 before the chemo days, go to the dry ice factory, get 60 pounds of dry ice, tip the guy $50 or whatever, because it'd be like $300 at Albertsons if they could even carry that much dry ice. Tip the guy some money to get my cooler filled up, get the cold caps all frozen in preparation for the first round that she was about to hit. And then every 20 minutes, I had to change the cap for 10 hours. So every 20 minutes for 10 hours, I had to change the cap, which means that I had to set the alarm for 5 minutes, pull the cap out, make sure it wasn't too hot, too cold, mold it, pull the old cap off with a lightning speed, put the new cap on, because if you fuck up one time, one cap, one time, you nuke her hair. So you could be doing this all the way through her final piece of treatment. If you don't put that cap on at the right time or right temperature, then that chemo-contaminated blood goes to her hair follicles in her head, and you nuke her hair on the last day after a years-long journey. So I had to be 100% right 100% of the time. And the level of intensity that you're sensing from me was the level of intensity and seriousness that I took that task. Not to mention all the other shit. I had to run my businesses. I had to compete amongst everybody else. I remember going on a podcast with somebody, and they were like, how many homes are you going to flip this year? And I'm like, 60. And they're like, oh my God, we're going to beat Galindo. This is the greatest thing ever. Dude, we're going to finally beat you. Everything in me wanted to say, yeah, but I also have a wife at home with breast cancer, and I'm still fucking competing.
Yeah.
So there you go. I haven't had to tell that story in a while, but it's a treat to tell it. So thanks for asking.
Well, hey, man. I think that there's a lot of men out there that need to hear that, because in those situations, a lot of the men that are experiencing that as a spouse, they don't have the same level of intensity. And I think that a lot of unnecessary things happen because they're caught up in the same misery cycle. And it's a miserable experience. It definitely is. It's a negative experience. But in those instances, and the reason that I ask you whether or not you're able to validate your own feelings is because it seems like you completely set aside your feelings from the situation and went, okay, what do I have to fucking do in order to survive this? Mm-hmm. What do I have to do to make sure that she survives this? What do I have to do to make sure that she's as comfortable as possible? And fuck everyone else's feelings. What do I need to do?
100%.
And a lot of men, I think, fall towards the wayside of, I just need to be there and make it as comfortable as possible, and aren't as vicious as they can be to make sure that they secure the result. So that's why I ask you.
Let me just, don't lose your thought there.
Please.
Something on that token is this wasn't about anybody's feelings anymore. It wasn't even about my wife's feelings. And to that point, the second that we knew, it was no meat, no sugar, and no meat, no sugar, no alcohol. That was it. Like the second we knew, that was deleted from the equation. Her stupid fucking idiot friends would come over and be like, oh, we'll go get her some sugar-free wine and we'll have wine. I'm like, if anybody gives this girl anything that has sugar, alcohol, or meat in it, you will get the wrath of me. So I didn't care that it pissed Crystal off. I didn't care that it pissed her family off. I didn't care that it pissed her friends off. Yeah. It was truly, the only way out of this thing was through it. And that's where I think a clear way to describe what I think you're trying to get at is the only way out is through. There's no around. There's no caring about people's feelings. You can mend all relationships once we win this battle. But right now, this is all business. And so that is the tone that I would encourage anybody going through this, that is the tone. Like, no, and you have to match it. No drinking. I didn't drink. I didn't have any sugar. That was intentional. Yeah. And if I was eating meat, it was clean meat, and it was just to maintain my body. But the reason I bring up is cancer loves sugar. You know how they find cancer cells? They inject your body with sugar, and they run you through, and the fucking cancer mites come out and start eating on the sugar. Yeah. Tell me how bad sugar is. And then I go to these chemo rooms. It's fucking disgusting. And the nurses bring you whatever shit you want to shove in your mouth. And I look over at another patient, and he's got a Mountain Dew, Oreos, all from the chemo factory. I'm like, you guys are literally perpetuating this disease and trying to fight it at the same time. Like it's the craziest thing. Anyway, so my point was is that there's no friends when it comes to health, and no friends. No friends. Yeah.
I appreciate that. I want to talk a little bit about Galindo gives. Can you tell us what cold capping is?
So cold capping is basically, in a nutshell, it's very similar to like a swollen ankle. If you have a swollen ankle, a lot of blood has been rushed to the wound because blood heals. And in order to get the blood to go away, you put something cold on the ankle and then the blood runs because the blood doesn't like all that cold. So the same concept is applied to cold capping, which is you put, because my wife lost her hair from her eyebrows down. Like she was bald. Yeah. That's how powerful chemo is. And she would have lost her hair on her head too. She kept 90% of it. And the way that she did that was cold capping. So these cold capping gel packs go on her head and are Velcroed down so that they're super cold and tight at minus 20 to 40 degrees. Minus.
On her head?
On her head. People would come over at the end of the cold capping day, her friends, to show her love and compassion, and we would, loosen up and play around. I'd throw them on somebody's head to mess around. They'd jump out of this cold cap in like 5 seconds. So my wife was very strong, and you have to be very strong to withstand that type of cold. But at the benefit of preserving your hair. So anyway, you put these cold caps on. So now that chemo-contaminated blood that's naturally circulating through your body avoids your scalp because it's so freezing. It won't even go there. It literally like goes up to like, let's call it your eyebrows. I don't know the science. And then reverses and goes back down. So the chemo and the chemo's only in your blood during the session, So when you take those caps off, the blood can naturally circulate through your body, and it's not full of chemo that kills hair follicles. And so what we learned from this experience was that all the doctors say it won't work. Crystal had the worst types of chemo that you can be given, and it worked. So I'm walking proof of it. And the worst part was that insurance wouldn't pay for it. So I would get insurance bills from the insurance company that the insurance paid, thankfully, but it was $99,500, $107,000. It cost $1 million to fix Crystal, and they wouldn't cover the cold capping. And the cold capping is $450 a month to rent the cold capping gear. And Crystal and I felt that if a female or male desires to keep their hair while going through cancer, because the main thing is that you get to look in the mirror and see health and normalcy. You know what I'm saying? You look in the mirror and you see that, you hopefully can manifest that. But if you look in the mirror and your eyebrows are gone and your hair is gone and your tan line's fucked up because your head's not, tan and the rest of your body is, or you're wearing wigs to go out, or you're wearing scarves or hats, and there's nothing wrong with that journey. If there's women out there that just embrace it and move on, my hat goes off to them. But if you choose to do it the way that my wife did it, I feel that represented health, and we wanted to manifest at any extent of control. And the other thing is it made us feel in control. Mm-hmm. We had control of one thing, and that was it. So we committed to putting together Galindo Gives, which is a legitimate nonprofit that raises money once a year during the holidays, and we sponsor cold cap patients that want to keep their hair, and they have to be legitimately in need of the money. Of course. And the reason is because you got to think about this. If it's $450 a month and their car payment's $450 a month and they're on a set income, if they have to make a choice, well, I'm going to stop making my car payment so that I can keep my hair. If I stop making my car payment, I can't get to work. If I don't get to work, I don't have insurance. If I don't have insurance, I die.
Yeah.
So we didn't want to make anybody have to make that decision. So we sponsor people.
And for those of you that are looking for resources, we'll put links in the description to make sure that you can get in touch with Galindo Gives if that's something that you're interested or if you're facing that challenge. So thank you for doing that, honestly.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move forward a little bit. Let's go towards, let's talk a little bit more about the business side of things, because that's really what I want people to take away. We've already covered incredible lessons that I think are going to be of value to most people, especially people that are going through those challenges. But you opened Galindo Group Real Estate as a result of being sued 4 weeks after Kennedy was born.
Dude, you've done your research. Well done.
I appreciate that. But talk to me a little bit.
Very well done. Very well done.
That's my insulin going off. But talk to me a little bit about what that felt like knowing that you're going to lose your investor and you just had your second child? And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the mistakes that you made so that way we can give some people something to avoid.
It was, I remember the time vividly. It was incredibly scary. I think the takeaway is that any change is scary. The bigger takeaway is that with change comes growth, and generally speaking, with growth is a positive. So it's not just scary, it's positive. But it's very hard to see that silver lining, that light at the end of the tunnel when you're in the thick of it. And so I'm not dismissive of that. It's just something to maybe keep in mind while you're navigating through that dark tunnel. But I do recall vividly how there was a lot of resentment. There was a lot of frustration because my investor had sued me 2 weeks after she was born. Was it 4 weeks or 2 weeks?
I believe you said 4 weeks before, but
okay.
we can just
yeah,
leave it
either
up to
one. So
speculation.
call it. It was probably 4 weeks, maybe whatever. And just to fuck with that moment in my life,
Yeah.
you know, and that was really heavy on me. And I was the sole provider at the time, and I just knew that I would always figure it out. I kind of just always know I'm going to figure it out. And at that time, I knew I was going to figure it out, but I didn't bounce around with glee. You know, that's the difference, is I'm a realist. I remember I had so much anxiety at that time that I'd asked my assistant that I had at the time, which I could barely afford, to go and get me a bottle of scotch. And I would literally have a glass of scotch on the table next to me while I was working, and then not slamming it ridiculously, but if I got like an excessive amount of anxiety, I'd sip my way through. So self-medicating my way through that level of anxiety.
Yeah.
It was a horrific time in my life. Lawsuits I've gotten a lot more comfortable with them now. But at the time, they're terrible. I remember I woke up every night at 3 a.m. At 3 a.m., I'd just pop up, and I would wake up and go, it's either 2:58 or 3:01, and I'd look at the clock, and it was either 2:58, 3 o'clock, or 3:01. My body would just pop up, and there was something, I Googled it, there was some correlation with adrenaline, where your body goes into a calm state, thinks it's in flight or fight, and then injects a level of adrenaline into you to wake you back up.
What the fuck?
I know, it was a fucked up thing. Anyway, long story short, I beat that guy. I won the case. I knew I would because I did nothing wrong. But I always make that point because when lawsuits are brought up, people often think that I'm the one that did something wrong, and I didn't. But a few lessons came out of that. When something bad in my life happens, I always say to myself, if I'm or is about to happen, meaning an outcome will dictate whether it's good or bad, I will go and buy myself something nice. And then I say to myself, if this goes bad and I have to write a check for this amount of money, at least I got this.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So almost every watch that I own, see, this watch represents a $63,000 loss on a house. I knew I was going to lose the $63,000, and so I immediately went and bought this watch and said, well, now this watch is a positive.
Yeah.
And it cost me $75,000 when really it only cost me like $14,000.
What kind of Rolex is it? Show the cameras. What do you got on there?
This is the Deep Sea. It's like the
Deep Sea sub?
Yeah, it's like a Submariner, but like a gigantic Pog.
Yeah,
and that's
yeah.
what I loved about it. I think it's a 42 millimeter, and I love the way the Submariner looks, but I felt it was a little too small for my hand, a little too entry level, so I got this one because I naturally like the way the Sub looks.
So that's where the watches and the cars come from, is wins
It's
or
all
losses.
of the watches, the cars, not necessarily, but all of the watches.
Okay.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
every single watch was associated with something that I didn't find favorable in my life, but I wanted to spin it around and make it a positive.
What a cool concept, man. All right, let's talk about some mistakes and talk about investments. Tell me the story of 1516 Willow Bark.
Oh, 1516. That's how I reference it. 1516 Willow Bark. So a big lesson there. Man, you are a great host. Jeez, they got to take lessons from you. 1516 Willow Bark. So I am in the early stages of my house flipping career. I've probably done, 120 homes. That's still arguably relatively new. And I buy this house, single story, 3-car garage, pool, Piccoli Ranch. And I'm about $17,000 through like a $40,000 renovation. I'm going to check on the property. I walk out to the street. The neighbor walks out and he goes, "Do you know what happened in that house?"
Before we get started here, talk to the people about what to do if the neighbor tries to tell you the story.
Never, ever talk to the neighbors. I am the first guy. I'm like, I don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear it. No, I'm okay. I don't want to be rude. I appreciate your input. I don't want to hear. Because the neighbors love to tell you, and here's the thing. Half the shit that didn't even happen in the house that these neighbors tell you. It's what their imaginations built up. You know, they're like,
it's the common lore around the neighborhood.
Right. The TV was loud, and then they heard that there was domestic violence in the house or something. I'm like, you don't even know that. Were you inside the house? Anyway, the point is that you don't want to know what was inside the house, because then you have what is called material information that you should disclose to the other party. So for me, I'd rather just not know. That's that. That's just my rule. So if you're out there buying investment properties, I'd highly encourage you, if a neighbor comes over and wants to go, "Well, let me tell you what Susie used to do in that house." You'd be like, "Sir, ma'am, I don't really care what Susie used to do in this house, and I'm going to walk away. If you need anything, my number's on the sign. Have a good day." And then I've done this game before, and actually, I'll even tell them the Willow Bark story to get them to understand my position. So. I walk out into the cul-de-sac. The gentleman goes, "Do you know what happened to that house?" And eager Josh Galindo at the time, "No, what? Tell me." I'm like, "Please tell me what happened. I'm so excited." And he goes, "Well, the gentleman that you bought that house from killed his wife, moved to Vietnam, or Vietnam. He was Vietnamese or something. Went over to Vietnam, lived there full time, put her body in a freezer, and would come back like every 6 months to make sure that the power was still on and that the body was still frozen. After 3 years, they speculate that he tried to move the body and it didn't go well. I don't know what happened. I can't speculate, but it didn't go well. And then he felt guilty. So he called the police and said, "Hey guys, I murdered my wife. She's in the freezer 3 years ago, and then I am going to go and off myself in the master shower, the primary shower. Please do a wellness call." And sure enough, the police rolled up, and he is no longer in existence in the shower, and the body was so frozen that it took 78 hours to like thaw out so they could figure out who the person was. And the worst part is that once I heard the story, I of course go to Google and I type in, I hate to even keep repeating the address because I feel bad for whoever owns it, but I did fully disclose everything about what happened. 1516, and sure enough, it would complete it. It completed it, and then it says murder, suicide.
Of course it does.
I'm like, oh my gosh. And then you click on it, and it's my house with a coroner's truck out front of it.
Oh, no, man.
Yeah.
And so this was a flip.
This was a flip.
Oh, my God.
And this is another one of those moments, which I think my whole life has been a lesson on. The only way out is through. Is the only way out of this was through it. And I like to do, I pride myself because organically I like to operate in a space of pure integrity. I don't have to think. I don't have to remember shit. As long as I'm always honest, I don't have to keep track of lies and stuff. So I replayed this scenario in my mind. What if Josh and Crystal were buying this home for themselves, and little Beckham, Kennedy, Kinsley, or Jagger are out in the street with the neighbor kids, and the neighbor kids say, "Do you know what happened in that house?"
Or in your room.
Or in your room.
Dude.
Yes, exactly. Or in your kitchen. Or in your mom's bathroom,
Yeah.
And then now I've got my little kids, living in terror inside their homes. So for me, even though in the state of Nevada, you are not required to disclose if somebody died in the house. You're only required to disclose if the house killed them. So if we're standing here and a beam flies down and slams you in the head and you die, I have to disclose that the house killed you. But if you just died, I don't have to disclose that you died.
No shit.
Trust me, I did a lot of research on this. But I still chose to, because of the horrificness around the event, I still chose to disclose it. And it was so funny? I had to go through like 3 buyers, lots of stress. Oh my gosh, we're never going to sell this house. We're going to lose money. Anyway, we didn't, and we were able to make a few bucks. But by the time we got to like our final buyer, the buyer's agent told me the buyer was like, "And we're from the East Coast. You know, like
those houses are hundreds of years.
yeah,
People
there are
die in those
exactly.
houses all the time.
And then as you start to like really understand houses and death and human beings, like if every house that somebody died inside of was like bulldozed or condemned or had a curse on it, there'd be no homes.
Yeah.
Like humans are passing away. That's a part of, you know, our existence on the planet.
Yeah.
Is that we eventually don't live. So
None of us make it out of here alive.
none of us make it out of here alive. So I sold that house, disclosed, and the buyers are fine. They were an older couple and we're like, we don't give a shit. We like the house.
Beautiful. I love that story, by the way. I think it's one of the best stories. Okay, so as we start to wrap things up here, I want to talk a little bit about two things: making and sustaining wealth, and then scaling a business. Because one of the things that I saw recently on a piece of content you created was that you didn't build Galindo Group Real Estate on purpose. It was almost on accident, is what you said. And so I have conversations with real estate agents, a lot of brokers that are trying to grow their businesses, and a lot of them make very simple mistakes that end up costing them very complex problems that come up in the future. Talk to me a little bit about some things that brokers or real estate agents or just entrepreneurs in general that are trying to build their business. Talk to me about a couple of things they should focus on and a couple of things that they should avoid.
The things to avoid, I believe, in business are competing against anybody, whether you know them, whether it's your best friend doing the same thing you're doing, or it's freaking Grant Cardone talking about it on social media, and everybody in between. Is do not compete with anybody, because competing creates comparison, and comparison will always land or die with doubt within yourself. If you're comparing yourself, you're always doubting yourself. So the main thing that I have learned in recent years, and I used to stop, like, I didn't follow a lot of big, Ryan Pineda and I were, he was a big house flipper. Now he's a big influencer, more maybe still house flipping. I'm not sure. But, in his early days, he was a big house flipper. In my early days, I was a big house flipper. That was my main thing. That was his main thing. And I just refused to follow him. And I didn't understand why, but I didn't get fuzzy, lovey feelings inside when I'd watch his content.
Sure.
Now, I hate to use him because he doesn't deserve to be used as an example necessarily, but you could apply that analogy to anybody. If you don't get warm, fuzzy, butterfly, good feelings when you see a competitor's content, a competitor's success, then I would not watch that. Because the reason you're not is because you're comparing yourself to them and then questioning what you're doing. So for me, I literally only try to beat who I was yesterday. I swear to you, it sounds cliche. It sounds like that's not true. That's not what you do. No. That is legitimately my secret sauce, is I just try to be better than who I was yesterday, a week ago, a month ago, a year ago. And as long as I can beat who I was, whatever time ago I was, then I'm winning.
Yeah.
And the great thing about that is I'm always winning. You know what I'm saying? Like, even if I do all of my best, like I just had it happen downstairs before I came up here. My buddy Ryan came in here and talked about how one of his associates named Carl has 405 rentals. I have 87 rentals. I literally slammed my head on the desk and was like, Jesus, I just can't fucking, no matter how hard I try, I'm not even putting a dent in the competition. Well, what that really was is me comparing myself to someone that has 405 rentals. And the reality is I've diminished my own success. I didn't give myself kudos for that. And all I have to do that's why I don't care about other people's success.
Yeah.
All that has to happen is I have to have 88 rentals next year and I beat who I was this year. And then it's a never ending win. You're always winning if you're just competing against yourself.
Yeah.
So it's not about looking at somebody else's numbers and this and that and saying, I'm going to beat those numbers. If you just beat the numbers that you put up last year, last week, last month, you will always win. Yeah. Because the reality is I don't know if I'll ever have 405 rentals. I'm also not 20 years. That guy's 20 years older than me. Oh, that's a variable. That's interesting. You don't take into account all of the different things. Maybe the guy, bought a piece of land in 1999 and sold it for $20 million and went and bought a bunch of rentals. There's so many variables that go into everybody else's success that you cannot duplicate because it's not, nobody's got the same exact journey. So there's no point in comparing yourself to everybody else. They may have gotten a bigger win at one moment that just uniquely happened. They may have had a bigger loss. That's the other thing, is trying to crush your competition too with your successes. What's the point of that? I may have gotten luckier than that guy. And it's a waste of energy. The comparison is a waste of energy. So for me, it's just about beating who I was yesterday. So the first thing I would say to any other brokerage, don't try to compare yourself to Galindo Group Real Estate. Don't try to be like Galindo Group Real Estate. Don't try to be like Huntington and Ellis. Don't try to be like Ivan Scher, Keller Williams, Realty One. Like, that's why I'm such a unique, carved out thing. If you really look at what Galindo Group Real Estate is, there's no accidents that it is its own island. It doesn't look like anybody else. Why? Because I didn't compare myself to anybody else. I didn't try to be like anybody else. I didn't try to copy anybody else. I said, I'm just going to do what I do and try to do it bigger and better every single year. And whenever I'm done with this journey, I'm going to look back and go, damn, I built something pretty cool. And maybe go, I'm done. You know, but it's not about compare. You can't compare yourself. So that's the first thing, what not to do. And then the other thing that I'm a big believer in on what to do when it comes to scaling and growth is that everything should be organic. I've seen a lot of business owners and business people believe that the only way to grow is to, and this is a good way to grow. I don't understand it. I'm not quoting it. This is my way, is they will go and borrow money, they'll go lease a space for $5,000 a month and they'll borrow $300,000, $1 million, whatever it is, through an SBA loan to build out their space and make it beautiful. Well, that, in my opinion, is not organic growth, and organic growth is not necessarily rewarded. Organic growth is rewarded when people see you growing as they're alongside you, and they're invested in the journey and they like it. But if everybody just rolled up to Galindo Group Real Estate at its final stages of its journey and was like, okay, I'm here, they're not going to have as rich of an experience or an attachment to the brand or company as the people that started. Some of my agents, I have the bulk of my agents, like my turnover is like very low. A lot of my day 1 through 50 agents are all still here. And they've got to watch this amazing thing called Galindo Group Real Estate transform into what it is. And now they're vested in it and they get to be a part of that rich journey. So to me, I'm not a big fan of artificial growth. And that's really what it was. I actually learned that from the Krispy Kreme model, if anybody ever goes and Googles that, but it's called forced growth. Forced growth is where you borrow a bunch of money and you deploy it and force growth. And it didn't work for them. They ended up losing all of their brick and mortar stores, or the bulk of them. And now they're in like 7-Eleven and they have a few brick and mortar stores here and there. So if you think about it, back when we were growing up, Krispy Kreme had lines at the drive-thru. That was their forced growth era. But so forced growth, I don't believe in. I believe in work really hard, sweat equity, grind, make 100 grand, keep 50, save 50, invest 50. Now you can invest 50 into your business, and then grind. And eventually what ends up happening is you grind so much, you've built so much sweat equity into your business that you hopefully have enough of a producing cash flow, enough of an asset that's producing cash flow that you can now hire, it can sustain itself, and you don't have to go out and grind. I'm not grinding anymore. I am definitely supervising, managing, watching, making sure all of this stuff works, but I'm not out there grinding anymore. But on day 1, I had to grind because I wasn't going to go borrow money to build this thing. It was going to be built with the money that this body created. And so you can look around. Outside of the debt I have on this building, which I own the building, all of this is paid for. Everything in here. TVs are paid for, tables paid for, the $1,000 worth of books, the chairs, the equipment, everything is cash. And when you have low debt, you can sustain a lot more turmoil.
Yeah.
And that is something I learned very early in 2008, is my boat tipped over in like a windstorm, and it was because I had too much debt. And so I am very anti-debt. I believe in debt, but I'm also very passionate about being able to manage it and be very cautious with it and understand just how dangerous it is. Debt will take you out, and it takes you out permanently. It takes you out for like 7 years because of bankruptcy.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Perfect. Well, did we
Did
get
you
all
get
of
all
that?
that?
It did get all that.
Okay.
I was about to cut you off.
Oh, we were just running out of
I was
storage.
like texting.
Hurry, hurry, hurry.
hurry.
All right, good. So at least we didn't lose it all. That would have been a
Well,
shame
that's
because that was
awesome.
good
No,
content.
That's a good. No,
Yeah.
I like that little. That was like a tactical reload right there, dude.
Yeah,
I
it
loved
was.
that.
That was a
awesome.
mid-flight refuel.
Yeah, that was dope. I know she kept pointing at me, and I was like,
Oh, really? I
Oh,
was
he's in.
watching
I
you
was
look
like,
at it.
I can't stop him. What are you talking about?
And like they were telling me to stop you on the. I was like, I can't.
I love it. This should stay in the podcast.
No,
this is fun.
I have no
It's fun
intention
and
of
raw.
editing it out, man. That's awesome. Okay, I really do appreciate that, and to be respectful of our time,
I'm okay on time.
Okay. So, one of the things that you've said that I think it's really important for business owners to understand and homeowners to understand, and it was something that resonated with me deeply. You said, never convert short-term debt into long-term debt. Tell us about what you mean and why it's important.
And thanks for allowing me to clarify that. Short-term debt, generally speaking, is something that is considered personal property. Is bullshit. Is shit. Short-term debt is put on credit cards. That's short-term debt. Short-term debt is car loans. Short-term debt is, I'll just use my life as an example, is like a golf cart. I just bought a new golf cart and I put debt on it. Short-term debt is borrowing for like a watch. Mm-hmm. Short-term debt is a suit, is your glasses, is gas. Okay, that's all living expenses and frivolous personal property is what I would call that. And what a lot of lenders do that I'm not a fan of unless this is the only option is they will go to the consumer and say, hey, you've racked up $40,000 in credit card debt. Let's take your home equity and let's roll that credit card debt into your equity, into your home equity or into your home loan. And then now your payment on your short-term debt goes from $2,500 a month to $500 a month. But what people don't realize is, yeah, it took the pressure off, but you've converted that short-term debt into long-term debt. And short-term debt is supposed to be painful. Mm-hmm. It's painful so that it tells you, stop. Hey, you're getting out of control. If your minimum credit card payment is beginning to get painful, that means you need to taper down the spending. And so if you relieve that pain and kick the can down the road, you've just eaten up $60,000 when you've extended the time it's going to take you to pay that debt back. So you almost want to endure that pain as long as possible is what I would say. Like I would look at somebody that would come to me with this type of a problem and asking for my advice. I would say, how long can you sustain this pain? And they're like, it's just not fun. It's not comfortable. It's really put a big restraint on my family's income and livelihood. And I would go, okay, that's all reasonable. That's good. That means it's giving you a warning sign that you're getting to a point where it's a little bit out of control. But if you can sustain this, then stay in the game and just get it paid off. Now, if someone comes to me and goes, I won't be able to make the mortgage payment next month, and so I need to do something different, then I would say, okay, then this is your other option. But it's kind of like, saying you've got, I don't know, a broken arm and you take a painkiller and all of a sudden you don't have pain, but you still have a broken arm. So I'm not a big fan of converting short-term debt into long-term debt. I think you should endure the pain, pay it off, get it out of your life, and not pay it off over a long period of time.
Okay. On the topic of debt and on the topic of finances, one of the things that you told me in one of the interviews that I was blessed enough to have with you was that the importance of bookkeeping and making sure that you're as granular as possible when it comes to that bookkeeping, especially when you're a business owner, is extremely important. And I've heard stories about how frugal. You use the word cheap. I use the word frugal. You
Probably
are
more appropriate
with the money that you do have based on how much you got coming in and how much you've got going out. I think that a lot of people make the mistake that once they have a comfortable income coming in, they start to overindulge. They start to spend a little bit too much. Talk a little bit about the importance of bookkeeping and how accurate that bookkeeping needs to be in tandem with being frugal with expenses.
I'm going to answer the first part or the second question first. So for me, the way that what I believe with folks that are making good money is they should continue to make good money until they have so much money that they can go and buy a cash flowing asset. And it doesn't have to be houses. People always think I'm only rentals. I only understand rentals and I only own rentals. But you could have, for the last 2 or 3 years, went and parked all of that cash in a 5.5% money market account. CD, you could have bought treasury bonds, you could have bought all these different types of cash flowing assets.
Yeah.
And then you live ridiculous and extra on that money. So all of my lifestyle and all of my flashy things are all paid for by my rentals. I don't buy anything that has a lasting, reoccurring payment unless my rental can pay for it. Meaning, I don't go and sign up for a big old car payment if my ordinary income depends on being able to pay for it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Because now there's stress involved. I have to go make money today or I'm not going to be able to make this car payment. All of my payments that I've signed up for that are lasting and reoccurring are all paid for by passive cash flow that come from my investments. So I am not an anti-live big. I believe in living big, but I think you should live big that way, not based on your ordinary income, because that is how life can get really challenging, is if life throws you a curveball and your ordinary income gets disrupted and you have all these debts surrounding, depending on its income, that's how the boat tips over.
Got it.
So, and then now to the bookkeeping question is, when you're running a business, you know, when I first started, everything was like Excel spreadsheets. That's all I knew how to use. So it was like an agent commission would come in, I'd type it in, I'd put his name next to it, the date, I'd minus out a transaction fee, and then I would pay him out the commission.
Yes.
Yep. And I would do everything with spreadsheets. So it was this and that, and but the banks don't give a shit about spreadsheets. That's the point. So as you grow, you're going to need to be able to tap into banking relationships, getting lines of credit to front payroll, and then when the payroll comes in, you can pay back the line of credit. But if you're going to play in the world of banks, you have to have perfect books. And then the more money you make, obviously the more you'd have to pay in taxes. Taxes never really scare me, and it's because I own a ton of real estate. If I didn't own a lot of real estate, then I would be writing big checks to the IRS. But because I own so much real estate, I don't have to do that because I can take advantage of the depreciation, cost segregation studies, etc. But most people don't have that luxury. So you want to track every dollar so that you're not paying tax on any money that you don't have to pay taxes on.
Yeah.
And the IRS doesn't necessarily honor Excel spreadsheets. The banks don't look at Excel spreadsheets. So it's very important to keep track of all of your expenses. And what I have encouraged a lot of young entrepreneurs that are on the cusp of getting away from the Excel spreadsheet game and wanting to get a full-time CPA or bookkeeper, is I tell them, take the leap, because it's a game changer once you get somebody behind the wheel that knows how to do all that stuff properly.
Perfect. Well, Josh, we've covered a lot of different topics, man. And like I said, this is a dream come true for me. And I love the fact that we were able to do so much for people. I have no doubt that people are going to get value out of this conversation. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for coming on the story. I appreciate you. And that is Josh Galindo's story.
Thank you very much. And well done. You did a killer job interviewing.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Very well prepared.
All right.
All right, brother.
Thank you.
Boom.
Thank you, Bayan.
There you go. You get to learn a little bit about me.
Yeah, twice now.
I thought you were born with the eye.
No, did I tell you that?
No.
Oh, I
No.
tell people that when they ask. If I don't have the time to tell them a story, I was born that way.
That's
You're-
it.